My name is Paul Kaplan, and the purpose of this project is to get to grips with those we have trusted for 2,000 years and who have repaid our trust by devastating and deceiving us. And that enemy is none other than our rabbinate, our trusted synagogue. And my fellow Jews, it's about time we opened our eyes to the fact that because of our rabbis, not one of us in 10,000 has the faintest idea what the covenant is. And because the covenant is the foundation of the Jewish nation, we cannot possibly know who or what we represent. And because of our lack of backbone and our general political cluelessness, it's easy for anyone who doesn't like us to paint us as the most horrible people on earth, which they do at every opportunity. Our politics and diplomacy are pathetic, and we bungle every major issue we have to deal with. And Israel is losing its struggle for survival on all fronts. The time has come for us to face the fact that the central cause of all of our troubles is the miserable mess we think is the Jewish religion, which is namely rabbinical Judaism, the cult of the Talmud. So let's look at a few examples of things that have gone wrong because of the rabbis and their trash that passes for Judaism. Take the delegitimization of Israel, for example. We can't actually prove that we are the one and only Israel because we don't actually know what it means to be the one and only Israel. We've forgotten that the only thing that makes us the genuine article is our covenant and our 10 commandments. And our Torah, which is the history of the effects of the covenant. The covenant is our only legitimacy, and without the covenant we have no legitimacy. If we are not the people of the covenant, or the people of the book, then we are not the genuine Israel. And we are every bit as bogus as our enemies say we are. And at the moment we are not the people of the covenant, or the people of the book. Instead, we are the people of the gigantic sea of petty and measly garbage known as rabbinical Judaism. And our credo is not the covenant. Our credo is the ocean of rubbish created by the rabbis, which is called the Talmud. And the rabbis insist that we should spend our entire lives studying this huge sea of trash. But that garbage is not the credo of Sinai. Our credo was engraved on 2 tablets of stone and not in 60 or 70 encyclopedias of rabbinical trash. And because we let the rabbis shove that garbage down our throats, instead of the power and simplicity of the 2 tablets, every year tens of thousands of our own Jewish children can't wait to get away from the humiliating fiasco that we have made of the most powerful and glorious inheritance that the world has ever known. See for yourself what our miserable rabbinical outlook does for us. Firstly, Israel's hasbara, or public diplomacy, is completely useless. It has never achieved anything and never will. It always falls flat and makes us look stupid and wrong, because it comes from the measly Talmudic ideas that the rabbis have crammed into our heads. And worse, we don't get our policies and attitudes from the majestic and powerful convictions of old. And worse still, this bilious slop that we call Judaism has a terrible effect on our young people on campus. They can't express themselves with the power and conviction that is theirs, that should be theirs, because there's simply no power and conviction in the Talmud of rabbinical Judaism. So all our youngsters have, in reply to the constant barrage of insult directed at them, is the decrepit and sickly garbage they get from the rabbis, because that's what we think is right, and they get treated accordingly. It's our fault, not theirs, because our response to their distress is to get the rabbis even more involved. And rabbinical cluelessness certainly doesn't improve the situation for our kids. And the rabbinical trash also squanders the generous funding provided by Jewish patriots trying to improve the situation for the kids. So how long can we expect our Jewish youngsters to defend their Judaism and their nationhood using rabbinical trash as their ammunition? All it brings them is pain and embarrassment that they don't deserve and would much rather do without. And then we come to the BDS problem. If the rabbis were not in the picture, we would long ago have frightened the daylights out of the lefties behind this BDS nonsense. And they have the nerve to tell us that they are destroying us with a heavy heart, as they put it. This shouldn't be happening. We are the Jewish people. We should no longer be cowards and idiots to be trifled with. And that brings us to what is probably the most criminal thing our rabbis have ever done. My fellow Jews, tens of millions of Christians are ready and willing to stand with Israel. But those good people have been unable to build a formal alliance because the rabbis have got in the way of it. The rabbis have positioned themselves at the interface, and they are deliberately sabotaging any attempt by the Christians to form an alliance with us. And an alliance with tens of millions of Christians would certainly be the most vital strategic element in Israel's security. And the Christians are unaware that the rabbis are sabotaging it. The rabbis know that the closer we get to the Christians, the more discussion there'll be about basic values and principles. And the rabbis certainly do not want any discussion about basic values and principles. They don't want us to think. They want to keep our noses buried in endless Talmudic trash, because that's their turf. That's where they hold the whip hand. And they know that once we start thinking about the real and genuine values, that'll be the end of their Talmud and their 613 mitzvot and their 2,000-year-old grip on our throats. And that leads to another rabbinical catastrophe. A year or two ago, the Prime Minister of Israel tried to persuade a joint session of the American Congress against President Obama's toxic nuclear deal with the theocratic Republic of Iran. And as we now know, Mr. Netanyahu's persuasion was not enough, and Mr. Obama got his way. But if a powerful Judeo-Christian alliance had been in existence at the time, it could easily have stopped Obama in his tracks. So because our Talmudic rabbinate didn't want an alliance with the Christians, Israel has to live with the threat of a lunatic enemy regime in its neighborhood with nuclear weapons. That's the sort of thing we get from our rabbis. Secret. And another thing, it's no secret that we Jews own most of the news and entertainment media. But because we are not the people of the covenant and have no proper credo, our media does not provide moral fiber to the American people. It doesn't provide any spirit of righteousness or dignity or anything like that. Instead, it does the opposite. It produces fake news, leftist stupidity, divisiveness, and gross ignorance. And American Jews are certainly not seen as champions of civilized values, law, precept, and moral fiber, but the very opposite. So how long can we sustain this behavior without a major crisis? And every time a non-Jew calls for some sort of moral rearmament, our damaged thought processes cause us to mistake their moral courage for anti-Semitism. Instead of helping them, we whine and panic and sabotage what they're trying to do. And then there's the matter of Jewish lunacy about illegal immigrants in sanctuary cities. Do we Jews not understand that Americans do not wish to be swamped by illiterate peasants from all over the world? And do we not understand that Americans do not wish to release illegal aliens and criminals onto their streets? When are we going to stop this damnable stupidity? What will it take? Another Holocaust? The rabbis should have done something about this lunacy years ago. But they have their heads buried in the Talmud, so what can you expect? The rabbinical dysfunction really came home to roost last century, when millions of us were herded into the gas chambers with hatred and contempt never experienced by any other people in the history of the world. And to this day, the rabbis still encourage us to believe that we were butchered purely because we were Jewish and for no other reason. But it actually happened because the rabbinical destruction of our credo had turned us into the most toxic leftists the world had ever known, just as our rabbis are doing now. And after the Holocaust, with full rabbinical approval, we built the Yad Vashem monument in Israel to commemorate what we called man's inhumanity to man. But the rabbis never asked the most important question of all. Did we bring the Holocaust on ourselves? And the other question, which will be asked in the near future, was the Holocaust because of them? And because of this typical Jewish attitude that we can do no wrong, this God-forsaken Yad Vashem contains not one sign of contrition or self-criticism. And that's the kind of blindness we get from our rabbis. And a nation without self-criticism is on its way to disaster. And today, the blind American Jews sit and gape while the lunatic left tries to drag the United States to hell in a handbasket. And we not only allow it, but some of us are actually leading it. And they don't realize how infuriating their leftist attitudes are to tens of millions of Americans. And are we not amazed that so many Americans continue to support Israel in spite of our atrocious behavior? Well, we should be amazed because those numbers are starting to dwindle. And another Jewish idea we get from rabbinical failure is our boneheaded tikkun olam, which means repair the world. Now this hogwash could mean anything. Some of us think we are repairing the world by advocating socialism. Others think America should open its doors to millions of illiterate immigrants. And some of us who are really as thick as planks think that tikkun olam means to release dangerous criminals onto the streets. And some of our real buttes think that tikkun olam means to tax businesses almost out of existence. And others want the state to dole out vast sums of money on welfare. But if not for the rabbis and their Talmud, we Jews would know what we knew thousands of years ago, that repairing the world is achieved by enforcing righteousness, law, discipline, honor, respect, kindness and courtesy with a rod of iron. And we would not swallow mindless hogwash like tikkun olam, thanks to the rabbis. One could carry on all night about our cluelessness, but if we carry on as we are, we will be responsible for the collapse of the whole of Western civilization. And we'll pay the price for it. Make no mistake. Now, if this project receives the funding requested here, then we'll be able to launch a powerful campaign on the internet and social media aimed at both Jews and Christians to make sure that the matter of the rabbis becomes a major confrontation that will not be stopped until it has run the full course laid out in the Bible. Now, according to the book of Revelation, the confrontation will be so furious and so vital to all of us that the entire Christian world will be dragged into it, and they will add their colossal power to the Jewish restorers of the covenant. And when this huge theological leap forward takes place, and the bedrock values are restored, this will start the 1,000 years of peace and prosperity promised by the giants of Scripture. And as for the rabbis, they'll be swept away like the people in the flood at the time of Noah. And same goes for the leftists. So which side will you be on? The Talmud or the covenant? On the side of God or the rabbis? But at any rate, before we can do anything at all, the inconvenient truth is that we will need a certain amount of money. And the necessary funding can come only from informed and determined people. So if you are one of those determined to restore order to a world gone mad, whether you are a Jew or a Christian, please step forward with a contribution, however small, and become a founder of what must surely become one of the greatest biblical events of all time. For the Jews, we are talking about Isaiah 60. And for the Christians, we are talking about Matthew 24:37 to 39. And nothing is more vital to the future of the human race than those biblical prophecies. So this is Paul Kaplan signing out and hoping that you will become a founder of this all-important movement. Thank you for your time and attention.